We have video of a New York City bicyclist deliberately knocked to the pavement by a pedestrian. The rider responds by pepper spraying the pedestrian in the face, leaving him writhing on the ground. Were both of these men justified in their use of force against the other? Were either of them? Neither of them? That's what we'll be diving into today. I am, of course, attorney Andrew Branca for Law of Self-Defense. I want to take just a moment to invite you all to our upcoming live and 100% free Law of Self-Defense Hard to Convict webinar. This free webinar teaches you how to be hard to convict if you're ever compelled to use force in defense of yourself, your family, or your property. The webinar is live streamed by me personally, and there's plenty of opportunity for Q&A. Best of all, it's 100% free, but we do limit seats to allow for adequate Q&A. So I urge you to grab your seat right now by signing up at lawofselfdefense.com/hard to convict. In fact, go ahead and pause this video and grab your seat right now. I look forward to seeing you all there. Let's start by going right to the videotape, and then we'll break it down section by section. So without interruption, here's that recording. I've muted most of it because of background noise, but I left in the only words that were exchanged between the two men. Here we go.
Hey, what happened, bro? What happened, man?
Okay, now let's start to break it down. First, I'm going to have to ask all of you to look at this from a law of self-defense perspective, and we'll apply that to both men. That's what we do here, is legal analysis. I'm sure plenty of you are thinking, don't start none, won't be none, F around and find out, and he had it coming about the pedestrian. Fair enough, I understand the sentiments, but sentiments are not legal analysis, and what we do here is legal analysis. Now, a few observations generally. First, this bicyclist is acting in violation of New York City law. Unless he's a child under 12, which this rider clearly is not, it's not lawful for him to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk as this rider is clearly doing. In fact, he appears to be part of a pack of what I guess I'll call bicycle gangsters, as we can see from another angle, with others in the pack also pulling these extended wheelies. But those others mostly appear to be lawfully in the street rather than on the sidewalk. But they're not all on the street. At least one other rider ahead of our guy is also rolling down the sidewalk, pulling a wheelie, as you can see here on the left side of this frame. We can also see the other dude. I'll call him Sunglasses Dude in the center of the sidewalk, observing that front rider on the sidewalk pulling his wheelie. Sunglasses Dude misses his shot at the front rider, but sees our rider coming up behind. Now, there's a reason why riding bicycles on the sidewalk is against the law in New York City, and that's because it presents as a substantial physical hazard to the many pedestrians on the sidewalk. The sidewalks are intended for human beings to be traveling at walking or maybe jogging speeds, not for human beings on metal bicycles moving far faster and with much greater energies. A collision between two pedestrians is a mere bump. A collision between a pedestrian and a rider on a bicycle moving at speed can readily cause substantial injury. So by riding on the sidewalk, this rider is creating an unjustified hazard of injury to others as a matter of law. Worse, he's doing so in a particularly reckless manner by doing all of this while pulling a wheelie. Having the front wheel off the ground clearly gives the rider less control over the bicycle than if he had the front wheel on the ground, increasing the risk of collision and harm to others. There doesn't seem to be any question but that the man in the sunglasses deliberately shoves our rider, striking him with his right elbow, causing the rider to lose his balance and fall to the ground. This intentional contact could be characterized as an unlawful, simple assault and battery. An assault, in that Sunglasses Dude put the rider in subjective fear of imminent contact. A battery, because deliberate unwanted offensive contact was actually made, and simple, because this seems a contact unlikely to cause death or serious bodily injury, which would otherwise qualify this as an aggravated assault and battery. Simple assault and battery is generally a misdemeanor, theoretically punishable by some months in a local jail, but generally with no time served for a first offense when no substantial injury resulted. Alternatively, this intentional contact could be legally justified as defense of others. That is, that Sunglasses Dude deliberately knocked down the rider, but did so in defense of other pedestrians against the imminent threat of unlawful bodily injury being presented by the rider's unlawful conduct in riding on the sidewalk. Self-defense would probably not be a viable argument given that Sunglasses Dude stepped up to the rider, but the rider's hazard remained to every other pedestrian on the sidewalk. Now, I'm not saying this would be the strongest defense of others argument I've ever seen, but given that the rider is already acting in violation of law simply by unlawfully riding on the sidewalk in the first place, it might sell. But let's assume the contact here was not justified and that Sunglasses Dude engaged in misdemeanor simple assault and battery. Does that mean that the rider was then legally justified in pepper spraying Sunglasses Dude? Note that I said legally justified, not morally justified. As I prefaced earlier, we do legal analysis here, not F around, find out analysis. Certainly, if we presume the contact to be unlawful, then the rider would be legally privileged to use defensive force to either defend himself against the impact itself or from the imminent contact occurring. So in this frame, for example, with the shove about to imminently occur, the rider would have been privileged to use defensive force. Now, his defensive force would be limited to mere non-deadly defensive force because he was facing only a non-deadly force threat. The prospects of serious bodily injury to a healthy young person being knocked back off a wheelied bicycle at these modest speeds is really inconsequential. So again, in this moment, the rider would almost certainly have been privileged to pepper spray Sunglasses Dude if we're assuming Sunglasses Dude's imminent contact here to be unlawful. The problem for any claim of justification for the rider's use of pepper spray, however, is that he did not spray Sunglasses Dude in defense against an imminent or actual shoving at this moment in time. The use of the pepper spray didn't occur until there was no longer any imminent threat from Sunglasses Dude. In fact, the rider actually chased down Sunglasses Dude in order to dose him with the pepper spray. We can see here that the rider passes the mailbox on the left and continues down the sidewalk a distance of about 8 of those metal grates to the point where he's shoved by Sunglasses Dude and falls to the ground. Folks, when you're walking to the fight, rather than the fight walking to you, it doesn't much look like self-defense to anybody. For sure, when the pepper spray is deployed, the Sunglasses Dude is standing on that second grate from the mailbox, so maybe a total of 9 feet from the mailbox. You can see the mailbox over the dude's right shoulder. Meanwhile, the rider had to backtrack about 15 feet to close proximity with Sunglasses Dude to pepper spray him. Sunglasses Dude never presents any kind of projectile weapon at all, or really any artificial weapon. So when the rider picks himself up from the street and the Sunglasses Dude is 15 feet away and not advancing, that dude is not presenting as any imminent threat against the rider. Sure, he shoved him to the street, but that fight's over. It's already happened. The rider's not defending against that shove. And if Sunglasses Dude is not presenting as any imminent threat, well, then there's no imminent threat against which the rider can lawfully defend himself. Even worse for the rider, if his use of pepper spray could not be legally justified in the absence of an imminent threat from the Sunglasses Dude, then it was not a defensive use of pepper spray at all, but an offensive use. And while we treat defensive use of pepper spray as being a use of non-deadly force, I would argue, have argued, that the offensive use of pepper spray should be treated as force readily capable of causing serious bodily injury and therefore should be considered a use of deadly force. Certainly the dude presents as if he suffered serious bodily injury in terms of respiratory distress, driving him to the sidewalk. In that case, the rider's unjustified use of deadly force would qualify as an aggravated assault and battery, and a felony good for a substantial prison term. Further complicating things for the rider is that the state of New York is a duty to retreat jurisdiction, meaning that if you have a safe avenue of retreat, you're required to take it before you can defend yourself. Now, that duty to retreat is imposed in New York only before you can use deadly force in self-defense. If you limit yourself to using non-deadly defensive force, you have no legal duty to retreat, even in New York, before you can defend yourself. But if this use of pepper spray in these circumstances qualifies as an offensive use of deadly force, then the rider did have a legal duty to retreat, if safely possible, before using that deadly force in self-defense. And clearly, the moment the rider was back on his feet uninjured with an operable bicycle, he could readily have retreated away down the street on his bicycle with complete safety. So in conclusion, with respect to the sunglasses dude, he nominally committed an act of misdemeanor simple assault and battery on the rider when he knocked a rider to the street, and has a moderately reasonable legal defense of others claim he can raise as a legal justification to that criminal charge. The rider, in contrast, could readily be looking at a criminal charge of felony aggravated assault and battery, and I don't see any possible legal justification for that use of pepper spray under these circumstances under New York law. Again, I understand those of you with feels about the F around, find out side of this discussion, that none of this would have happened without Sunglasses Dude kicking things off in the first place, and he had it coming. Simple vengeance, however, in the absence of an imminent threat, is not a lawful use of force. And that's all I have to say about that for the moment. I'll close out by reminding all of you that if you carry a gun so you're hard to kill, that's why I carry a gun, so I'm hard to kill, so my family is hard to kill, then you also owe it to yourself and your family to know the law, so you're hard to convict as well. Until next time, I remain Attorney Andrew Branca at lawofselfdefense.com. Stay safe.